everyone here today. Thank you for joining us as we're going to provide you with an update on recent homicide arrests. Today we have our Chief Mannheimer here who's going to speak, our Deputy Chief Armstrong, as well as our Deputy Chief Lindsay, Captain Jones, and we also have Lieutenant Shavy, who are all going to provide these updates for you today regarding our recent homicides arrests. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Susan Mannheimer, the Interim Chief of Police for the City of Oakland. I have with me today some of the hardest working men and women in the policing profession right now. As you all know, we have been talking with you all and our community and our city leaders about the unprecedented, uncharted spike in violence, particularly in the most dangerous violence, the gun crimes, that we have been seeing here in the city of Oakland, but has been mirrored nationally in most of our major cities. I know this because I am on the major city chiefs' calls weekly, and I can tell you that nationally, depending on which week you look at, the spike in gun violence, homicides, shootings, and assaults with a firearm have spiked anywhere from 50 to 80%. We are already up above 80 homicides compared to around 58 last year, and we have several very busy months to go. And so today, I don't want to dwell on what we're seeing out there. You have been covering it. You are our partners in this call to action, awareness, and safety. I want to share a little bit with you today on what we are doing out there and what we're seeing. And so behind me, you'll see a table laden with weapons. These are weapons that we have recovered just on several of the cases we're going to be talking about with you today. The amount of firepower out there, the high level of rounds, 3 to 4 shootings and ShotSpotter recordings alone every night, and we respond to every one of those, is sometimes punctuated by recordings of 50, 60, 80 rounds. And so this last couple of days, we have made some arrests that we want to share with you because they are really a great indication of what we're facing and what we're doing about protecting and defending our communities, our families, and our neighborhoods' right to peace and safety within their communities. And so I thank you for covering this because the actions of the men and women in making these cases and the violence that they face nightly as we stand out there and respond with our communities is something that I want to bring to highlight right now as I thank them for doing that work and thank our community for understanding the constraints we're under and the absolute dedication and commitment we have to bringing our shooters to justice and holding them accountable so that we ensure the safety of our neighborhoods. I'm going to turn it over today to Deputy Chief Armstrong. You have heard from him as well, out on the crime scenes, out walking the neighborhoods with our community, as well as yesterday peacefully resolving with the brave men and women out there a hostage and shooting situation. And so I'm going to kick it off with him, and then what we want to really bring to you today are some of the results of the arrests. And the reason I think this is important, it gives you a good idea of what's going on in our community and the incredible efforts we're making and the results we're seeing. Thank you all, and I now want to bring up Deputy Chief LaRon Armstrong of our BFO2. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So you've seen me come before you several times over the last couple of weeks, really appealing to the community that we needed their help, that we had seen a tremendous increase in violence that we felt like needed to be addressed. One of the things we promised you during those interviews was that our department would respond, that we would follow up on every case, and that we would bring people to justice. And so today is really the culmination of that. It really is to say to the public that we have done our due diligence, that we have followed up like we said we would, and we will continue to address the violence that's occurring in our community. But we also want to say to the community, we appreciate them believing in us and bringing forth information to help us solve these cases. This is a challenge for us as we address violence, but today you'll see that working collectively, not only with our OPD department, but our other local and federal partners who assisted us in some of these arrests, you'll see collectively we've been able to bring people into custody. We will continue to focus on violence in East Oakland. And today you will hear from our criminal investigations division talking about some of these key arrests and the recovery of some high-powered weapons that many of our community members have heard. I've heard. I've walked in these communities and heard from community members about the level of violence that they're seeing, the number of shootings that they're witnessing in their own communities. And today, I'm pleased to say that the OPD has made some key arrests in those particular incidents. And so I just thank you for covering it, and I appreciate the community's help, and together we'll continue to be able to drive down the violence.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deputy Chief Lindsay. I'm in charge of the Bureau of Investigations. We have had a successful week with charging several cases related to some of the homicides we've experienced over the last 3 weeks. So far this year, as the chief has indicated, we've had 80 homicides. And out of those 80 homicides so far this year, we've been able to charge 45 of those cases. 29 of those cases were from homicides from this year, and 16 of those cases were from previous years. 6 of the cases that we charge were from this week. I'll let Lieutenant Chavies give you more specific information on that. One of those cases was a case from 2018. So although we do continue to work on cases that we experienced from this year, we do continue to work on cold cases and pursue leads that leads to prosecution as well. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Chavies, who can provide you specific information on some of those key arrests that we've had this week.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frederick Chavies. I'm the lieutenant of our homicide section. I just want to talk about a few cases from this week. And so on September 28th of this year, we had 2 homicides in our city that occurred within 30 minutes of one another. One we responded to that evening, and another we were alerted to the following day through community members with which members of our department have built relationships. We found that there was a homicide that occurred at an illegal gambling shack, or 2 homicides that occurred at illegal gambling shacks, one of which the body had been moved and dumped at a homeless encampment. The 2 cases have both been linked ballistically, and we were able to take a gentleman into custody yesterday, along with 2 others in previous weeks that we believe are responsible for those cases. Yesterday, or early this morning, the district attorney charged the gentleman arrested yesterday in those homicides. On October 14th of this year, there was a double homicide out in the 1900 block of 84th Avenue. Again, investigators from the homicide section that have previously worked on Ceasefire and have built and forged relationships in the community around reducing group and gang violence were able to leverage those relationships and find out the identity of witnesses. Those witnesses were quickly contacted and interviewed and provided the names of suspects responsible for those cases. Through our investigation, we were able to locate the gentleman responsible for the triple shooting and double homicide that occurred that afternoon, and we were able to take him into custody yesterday following a long standoff that ended peacefully under the leadership of Captain Tony Jones from Ceasefire. That gentleman as well was charged this morning by the district attorney's office. The following day, on October 15th, 2020, a gentleman was murdered at 89th Avenue and International Boulevard. We know that that area has been troubled by narcotics trafficking. We were able to lean on both current and former OPD officers familiar with the area that have built relationships in that area to get witnesses to come forward and provide statements to homicide investigators. We're able to identify the suspect involved in that crime, as well as the vehicles used in that crime. The suspect was taken into custody earlier this week. A search warrant was served at the location where he was arrested. He was in possession of a large amount of heroin, 2 firearms, and the search warrant at the location yielded an additional 6 or 7 firearms and a large amount of marijuana at this location. We would not have been able to have such success this week had it not been for the relationships that we've built in the community. We can't do this alone. The community has helped us solve these crimes. And so I would like to call upon the community to help us in the other 59 cases that we haven't had, or 51 cases that remain unsolved. We have good leads on a number of them. I'd like assistance from our community to help us solve cases like Aaron Pryor, which occurred September 27th of this year, a young man gunned down in broad daylight. Xavier Patton, who was killed at 65th and International, attending a college going away party while he was here visiting from college. And those are just 2 cases, along with the many others, of young people and other community members that have been victims of gun violence in our city. So I'd like to ask the community to continue working with us and continue helping us solve these cases so that we can bring some justice and some closure to these families. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Captain Tony Jones. I'm the captain of our Ceasefire division. The Ceasefire teams work really closely with Homicide, have been really involved in partnering with Homicide and our criminal investigations division to, at the field level, conduct the operations that actually make these cases all come together and make sure that we bring the people responsible for the weapons that you see here, that we bring them into custody in a very safe manner. How we make these arrests is just as important as making the arrests themselves. We want to make sure that our officers are conducting themselves in line with what the community expects. Our officers, obviously, if you look at the firepower over here, are faced with a tremendous amount of firepower these days. There's been a significant increase in the number of high-powered weapons that we've been seeing proliferating through the Oakland streets these days, especially, like the chief said, with the magazine capacity that we've been seeing. We're seeing 50, 100-round drums, and through our ShotSpotter program, we can hear the activations, and you hear 60, 70-round shots fired, and that just creates a extremely frightening environment for the people who live in the neighborhoods that are plagued with these issues. We've talked about Ceasefire a lot with the community. It's a partnership between OPD and the community, and working with the most at-risk individuals who are most likely to be shot or most likely to commit a shooting. And a significant piece of that operation is the intervention work that we do with our community partners. We faced some challenges recently because of the issues around COVID, the limitations placed on face-to-face contact. But we're working through those issues with our partners to be more effective, to be to resume in a safe manner those call-ins that we do, where we engage in direct communication with people who we know are prone to violence, and offer them services, offer them other alternatives that could potentially steer them away from the different violent crimes that we're seeing out in the streets right now. We're also working really hard with our partners to find alternatives for the juveniles. Last year in 2019, we didn't have any juveniles who were murdered, and so far, unfortunately, this year in 2020, we've had 6. And so with the lack of recreational activities, athletics, schools, we have to work with our partners and find alternatives for our young people so that we can keep them safe. And we're going to continue to work with Homicide. There are a lot more investigations that Ceasefire, Criminal Investigations Divisions, and our outside law enforcement partners are working on. So hopefully we'll be bringing a lot more of these homicide cases to closure here soon. Bringing justice to the families and giving them some closure for the traumatic experience that they feel when they lose a loved one in the streets to gun violence. So as you can see over here, that is a lot of firepower right there. And the Oakland police officers, even in the face of a pandemic, in the face of these high-power weapons, continue to come out every day and serve the people of Oakland in a manner that is exceptional in our opinion. So that's all I wanted to say to you all, and I think I'll turn it back over to the chief.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darren Allison. I'm the Assistant Chief of Police, and I just wanted to kind of reverberate and add to some of the thoughts that were shared. As you can hear and see, that the men and women of the Oakland Police Department deeply care about the Oakland community. The folks that are wounded, that are scarred by the gun violence out there, the victims of our crimes, they're not a number. They're real human beings that have loved ones, families, friends that are just traumatized and heartbroken over this violence. And we take it very seriously. As you can hear and as you can see, that in response to the levels of violence, we have been very focused in our efforts to bring those who commit acts of violence to justice. And that we will not back down, we will not relent in any way, and we'll continue to drive forward with our actions to ensure that people see justice and that families experience closure with their lives. As far as the path forward, as Captain Jones has indicated, a large part of what we do around Ceasefire is a very, very important work. In my 25 years here at the police department, I've seen the effectiveness of Ceasefire, working collaboratively with our communities, our stakeholders, our community-based organizations, our intervention partners, our law enforcement partners. We have seen violence driven down over the years, and we will continue to use those strategies and work collaboratively to see the violence continue to go down. And I think that the important thing to note with the Ceasefire approach is that the violence that we see in our communities doesn't have to be, that there is a way out. There is intervention that can be utilized and a path that can be chosen that doesn't have to end in violence. And so know that we will continue with that strategy, but also know that if we do continue to see acts of violence, that we'll use all of those resources in our enforcement toolkit to see justice served. So I just wanted to make sure we highlight that and know that we stand united with the community and we're committed to defend and protect the community. Thank you.
So today, before I turn it over for a couple of questions, I just want to let you know you have done a good job of covering what we've seen in our community over these last several months. The amount of firepower, the amount of killings, the amount of shootings, families traumatized in their neighborhoods, in their homes. Our message today is they do not stand alone. We are out there with them every single day, 24/7, working these cases, providing the presence, and providing options, frankly. We at Ceasefire, at the Oakland Police Department, with the Department of Violence Prevention and all our community-based organizations, hope to offer alternatives. But make no mistake about it, if you will fire high-powered weaponry that has our family members ducking as they're eating dinner at their kitchen table, we will be out there holding you accountable. Our men and women are also working 24/7. We are bringing cases to justice. We are getting the firepower off the streets. Over 1,000 guns seized this year alone. That's over 36% more than we have seen all of 2019, and yet the firepower still exists. We respond to every shot spotter activation. Not many other agencies do that. and we are here bringing them into justice. So we are retooling during the pandemic. My appreciation to the level of command and leadership you see behind you, driving forward our resources, to those men and women every single day of the OPD who are out there risking their lives in this violence and have come upon, in fact, shootings in progress and have taken those individuals safely into custody, as we saw yesterday with an armed encounter. That's our goal, that's our mission, and to provide those alternatives for them. So to the community members who are out there experiencing this, I want to assure you we stand with you. We will not stand for this. We will take those who want the alternatives and the services, and we will intervene. But for those who will not, this is a call to action and a call to notice that we are out there and we will stop this violence. We've done it the last 5 years. We drove it down 50% with our strategies, and we will do it again. Thank you so much, and I leave it open to any questions.
Chief, I'd like to ask regarding why the uptake. I know some of you mentioned about specific neighborhoods, but I wonder if the recent upticks, do we have some reasons as to why we're seeing it?
We do, and you know, so you ask about the reasons for, okay, so you ask about the reasons for this uptick in violence. This has been a question, a concern. There's studies ongoing. It is clearly during the pandemic. We in Oakland and across the country continued to see decreases the first quarter. As you'll remember, the pandemic hit just about as the second quarter began, and then the third quarter, and we have seen percentage upon percentage increases during that time. And the question is the one that's so important, which is why the spike in violence. And we think there's many reasons for it. And some of them are really our best guesses as we are on those chiefs calls nationwide, as we speak with our partners in the faith community, the social workers, the violence interrupters. And we can tell you that the same areas that are getting hit with this violence are the same ones that are experiencing the tremendous pressures around the pandemic. The health issues, the disparity in education, in technology, in medication, in PPEs, the re-entry of those prisoners coming back because of the decrease and the safety in the prisons. We are all about that. We know they're coming home, but they're coming home this time without reentry services, without a plan, and without resources. We talked to you earlier about 6 juveniles killed this year. That's 6 more than in 2019. So let me say that one more time. 6 juveniles alone killed this year. And that doesn't go into the amount that were injured or that were shooters. For whatever reason they were involved. And that is 6 more than we had in all of 2019. We had none. You ask why? I think we know that the #1 driver of crime for juveniles was that after school period, 3 to 6 p.m. Well, there is no school, so these juveniles have no structure, no intervention, support, mentoring from those adult relationships, whether in school, athletics, no structured activities, and really no lifeline and pipeline. And so we are doing what we can around that. And I think we can end up with the fact that the anxiety and the level of violence itself almost begets more violence as we have young people and others arming themselves because of that level of violence. So it's upon us and our community to tell everyone, put those guns down. That is not the way to solve these. But the stress, the anxiety, the lack of structure, the lack of opportunities, and really the huge spike in group gang conflict is driving this.
Chief, you talked about juveniles. Are those the 6 victims or shooters?
Those are 6 victims. Yes, we have seen that uptick in juvenile, particularly juvenile groups and gangs.
And just to follow up, do you feel most of the shootings are random or they're targeted shootings? Yes. And does it make any difference in terms of where you think this is all going?
I'm going to let Captain Tony Jones of our Ceasefire unit answer that, because what we have going in Oakland is pretty amazing. As you know, I'm the interim chief here. We have a Department of Violence Prevention. We have violence interrupters. We partner with Youth Alive. We have our Ceasefire, our community partners, our social workers. And so we are really digging into all these cases in order to interrupt them. So I would like to ask our Ceasefire Captain Tony Jones to come up and give you his best answer to that.
Yes, we are seeing an increase in juvenile activity, as far as being involved in criminal activity, and not just in shootings, but also in other crimes as well. And we definitely attribute that to the lack of, recreational activities, school, athletics, all of the things that were present for the young people in Oakland that weren't, very robust in the first place. Those things aren't there for young people, and so what we've seen is that unfortunately a lot of our young people have turned to involving themselves in activities with some of the gangs and groups that we track here at OPD.
I know the mayor on Sunday was going to interview her Gregory because she talked about because of COVID, the ceasefire programs or the in-person meetings were suspended because of COVID. And she says that's going to come back on soon. Can you talk about, elaborate on that? When are we expecting to see the ceasefire back up again, or that happen soon if it has been suspended?
Yes, so the mayor has been very clear with us as far as what her expectations are around, retooling our call-ins. What our call-ins are we use very specific data that we draw from criminal investigations and other sources from community members to bring people in for a conversation, groups of people who we know are involved in gun violence. And in those meetings, what we call call-ins, there's members from OPD, our partners from the District Attorney's Office, FBI, pretty much every law enforcement entity that operates in the city of Oakland. We deliver a tailor-made message to the people who attend these meetings around their particular circumstances. We then leave the room and community members, people from groups like Faith in Action, our faith-based groups, community-based organizations, social workers, and our partners from DVP, then try to steer those those individuals away from criminal activity, away from groups, and into services. Things like programs that could help them get tattoos removed, or job training programs, to get them to realize that there's other alternatives than being involved in gun violence in the city. So because of the pandemic and the shelter in place, we haven't been able to have those call-ins. But things are improving, and we are going to be creative and find ways to have these call-ins where we don't put the participants at risk, our staff at risk, and the community people that come and support the call-ins at risk of exposing them to COVID-19. We've already began the process of doing them as of a few days ago. I'm sorry? I can't hear you. Oh yes, and then another thing that that OPD has restarted under our OPD Cares program that Chief Manheimer has stood up is we resume the night walks. This is where community members go to some of our most violent neighborhoods and just walk and talk to people in the neighborhood, talk to people who may be involved in some of the activity that's been going on, and just try to have some kind of rapport and dialogue with the individuals and the people who live in those particular communities, and just let them know that there's a focus on that area and that people care. I know that Mayor Schaaf participated in some walks recently out in East Oakland on 85th Avenue, and so we're trying to just pump as many resources and as much focus as we can into the areas that are experiencing the most significant rise in gun violence. But as a strategy, though, at OPD, we still want to focus on the individuals who are involved in the gun violence rather than focusing on areas, because that's what we've done over the last 5 years, and that's what leads to the reductions in gun violence, focusing on people, not places.
Just so I get my numbers straight, how many arrests are you announcing today? And then also, why do you think there's been such a large increase in firearms taken off the street?
I'll let the chief answer that.
So we are announcing the arrest in 6 homicide cases. So 2 homicides that occurred on September 28th, 2 homicides that occurred on October 14th, 1 homicide that occurred on October 15th, and a homicide that occurred in 2018.
But 5 of those are recent.
4 arrests of 5 homicides that are recent, yes. Okay. 1 double was committed by 1 individual.
I just wanted to clarify a little bit of that, and that's probably part of the reason we're here today with you all. We've had so many shootings, as you know. I think you experienced it real time with us over the triple shooting over on 84th. Not, what, a week ago? Even a week ago, Chief Armstrong was heading out there with some of our team to go walk in the neighborhood several blocks away, a neighborhood that had seen the night before, maybe 2 nights before, 60 or more rounds on ShotSpotter while eating dinner. A community that ended up not knowing when they should even come out of shelter with their family, with rounds in cars, rounds in houses. And as they were going out to walk in that neighborhood, the triple shooting happened on 84th. Can you imagine? And we went over there instead to find that 2 were killed and another injured. And so the levels of and the volume have been such that we thought it would be nice to come here today and show you just a slice of these 4 cases over the last 3 weeks, which killed 5, injured several more, and resulted in the seizure of some of these weapons that you see behind you, because it helps to illustrate that it's hard to, even for us, to keep track of the number of cases that we are solving on a daily basis to bring before you. So we thought that coming here today to share with you some of what we've been able to do in really stopping incredibly violent individuals, such that one engaged in what he wanted to have as a shootout. And our officers did not respond. Through hostage negotiations, we were able to resolve that peacefully, but that's the level of violence. So really it's 2 messages. And the first is that unprecedented, uncharted levels of violence in our neighborhoods. But OPD is not only well equipped to handle it, we have been here before, and we had 5 years of successfully driving it down with our Crime Gun Intelligence Center, our partners, our community, as well as our ceasefire model. And we are here to do so again. It is complicated by many, many issues, the least of which is we recognize we can't only arrest ourselves out of this, but for that group of violent shooters, we will and are making cases on them, taking those weapons away and putting them in jail. And so the bottom line is we stand with you, Oakland. We will do it in a way that's measured, proportionate, and we will stand and protect our community from this violence.
Do you want to talk about the spike in gun?
Yes. So I'll leave that to Deputy Chief Armstrong, who's going to close with our OPD Cares initiative and some of what we're seeing out there. Thank you. Yes. You know, it's interesting. We will say that a lot of the shootings and the conflict is happening more in East Oakland, but if you look at those ShotSpotter activations, they are sort of a central swath throughout the city. We post that ShotSpotter data for that map every Tuesday, and every Tuesday we are ourselves surprised at the levels of the gunfire. And keep in mind, we respond to each and every one of those. Thank you.
I'll close. These are not weapons that should be in anybody's community, but yet we see them being used in East Oakland. These communities are dealing with trauma. These young people are scared. Community members are scared. And today, by us recovering these weapons, we hope our community feels somewhat safer. OPD Cares really is about OPD collaborating with our community to say, we are here. We are going to have a greater presence in your area. We are going to be there for you to come to our resource vans and ask for help. We're going to be there to provide PPE when it's available, masks, sanitizer, because we understand that we're in a pandemic. But clearly what you see on this table behind you are weapons that don't belong in anybody's community. They can do nothing but harm. And so I appreciate the hard work of our officers, appreciate our community working with us, but what you see on that table is unacceptable. And we hope that everybody understands that these weapons should not be used in our community, and if they are, we will relentlessly follow up to hold you accountable. So thank you.